As I strode through the dimly lit corridors of Hogwarts, the chill of the dungeons seeped into my bones, a familiar companion after so many years. The hour was late, far past midnight, and the castle slumbered under a blanket of silence, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the stone walls. My robes whispered against the flagstones, a sound that had become as much a part of me as my own heartbeat. Teaching potions to ungrateful whelps by day, brewing elixirs and patrolling for rule-breaking students by night. It was a rhythm that left little room for anything else. But tonight, something felt amiss, a subtle tension in the air that prickled at the back of my neck. I approached my office door, the heavy oak etched with wards that only I could disarm with a flick of my wand. As I murmured the incantation, the lock clicked open, and I pushed inside, expecting the solace of solitude. Instead, I froze. There she was, my apprentice, huddled in the shadows near the far wall, her slight frame curled into itself like a wounded animal. The fire in the grate had burned low, casting flickering orange light across her pale features, making her look even more ethereal than usual. Her dark hair fell in disheveled waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, those piercing crimson eyes she no longer hid from me that marked her as something other than human, were fixed on the floor, avoiding mine entirely. She had come to me 2 years ago, a rogue vampire barely out of her teens in mortal terms, though her true age was a mystery she guarded closely. The ministry had deemed her rehabilitated after using blood potions, but I knew better. Vampires were creatures of eternal hunger, not easily tamed. Over time, she'd proven invaluable, her senses sharper than any human's, her instincts for rare ingredients unmatched. We'd developed a quiet understanding, a partnership built on mutual respect and unspoken boundaries. She never fed in my presence, relying instead on the blood potions I brewed for her, and the ones the ministry had given her, sourced from ethically dubious donors via the black market. They sustained her, or so I'd thought. But now, seeing her like this, I knew something was terribly wrong. She didn't move as I entered, didn't even acknowledge me with a word. Her hands trembled faintly where they clutched at her knees, drawn up to her chest. The air held a faint metallic tang, not from my cauldrons, but from her. The scent of desperation, of a predator on the edge. I closed the door behind me with a soft thud, sealing us in together. I called her name softly, my voice low and steady, though concern tightened my chest like a vice. She flinched at the sound but said nothing, her gaze still averted. I crossed the room slowly, my boots echoing on the stone floor, and lowered myself into the armchair opposite her makeshift perch on the floor. The shadows played tricks on her skin, highlighting the unnatural pallor, the faint blue veins tracing patterns beneath. She was thinner than I remembered, her cheeks hollowed, her lips cracked and colorless. How had I not noticed sooner? The potions, I'd supplied her with fresh batches just last week. Were they failing her? I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, studying her intently. You've been avoiding the Great Hall, the common areas, and now this, intruding in my office at this hour. What troubles you? No response. She shifted slightly, her fingers digging into the fabric of her robes, knuckles whitening. A soft, involuntary hiss escaped her lips, not aggression, but pain. My mind raced through possibilities. A curse, perhaps. An attack, perhaps. Had someone found out about her? Or worse, her hunger. Vampires could starve themselves into madness if denied proper sustenance. The potions were meant to prevent that. A synthetic blend infused with essence of dragon blood for potency. But if they weren't enough... A chill ran through me as realization dawned. She needed real blood, fresh, vital, from a living source. And here she was, in my domain, not asking, not demanding, but simply present. Waiting. No, not waiting. Enduring. Her silence spoke volumes. She feared what she might do if she gave in. Feared hurting me, perhaps, the one person who'd shown her a modicum of trust in this wizarding world that viewed her as an abomination. I rose quietly and moved to the cabinet where I kept my personal stores. From a hidden compartment, I retrieved a small vial of crimson liquid, my emergency reserve drawn from my own vein months ago for experimental purposes. It wasn't much, but it was pure, untainted. As I approached her, she finally lifted her head, her eyes meeting mine for the briefest moment before darting away. They were glassy, rimmed with red, not from tears, but from the strain of restraint. Her fangs, usually retracted, peeked slightly from beneath her upper lip, a telltale sign of her weakening control. "Sit properly," I instructed gently, gesturing to the chair I'd vacated. She hesitated, then unfolded herself with agonizing slowness, perching on the edge like a bird ready to flee. I knelt before her, a position I loathed, one of vulnerability, but necessity overrode pride. "The potions are insufficient," I stated, not a question, but an observation. She nodded almost imperceptibly, her breath coming in shallow rasps. "You've come here because you trust me not to turn you away, or perhaps because you have nowhere else." No words from her, only a faint tremor that shook her frame. I uncorked the vial and held it out, but she shook her head minutely, her eyes flicking to my wrist instead. The synthetic wouldn't do. She needed the warmth, the life force directly. My pulse quickened at the implication. To offer myself to a vampire was folly, a risk that could end in exsanguination if her control slipped. Yet seeing her like this, so fragile and tormented, stirred something deep within me. Concern, yes, but more. A fierce protectiveness I'd long buried under layers of cynicism. She was my apprentice, my charge. I would not let her suffer. With deliberate care, I rolled up my left sleeve, exposing the pale skin of my inner arm. The veins stood out faintly in the firelight. "If this is what you require," I murmured, my voice steady despite the knot in my throat, "then take it. I offer it willingly." Her eyes widened, a flicker of horror crossing her features, fear not for herself, but for me. She shook her head again, more vehemently, her hands clenching into fists as if to hold herself back. But I could see the hunger warring within her, the way her pupils dilated, fixating on the pulse point. I reached out, gently prying one of her hands open and placing it on my arm. Her touch was ice cold, sending a shiver through me, but I held firm. "You will not harm me. I know you better than that. You've controlled yourself for years. You can do so now." She made a small, choked sound, not quite a word, more a plea, but her fingers tightened slightly, drawn inexorably to the warmth. I nodded encouragement, my free hand cupping her chin to lift her gaze to mine. "Trust yourself as I trust you." Slowly, agonizingly, she leaned forward, her breath ghosting over my skin. Her fangs extended fully now, sharp and glistening, but there was no savagery in her eyes, only gratitude mingled with torment. As her lips brushed my arm, a brief sting followed, then a curious warmth spreading from the point of contact. I watched her, unflinching, as she drew sustenance, her swallows measured and restrained. The sensation was oddly intimate, a sharing of essence that bound us in ways words never could. Pain mingled with a strange euphoria, but I focused on her, on the color returning to her cheeks, the tremor easing from her limbs. When she finally pulled back, sealing the punctures with a lick of her tongue, a natural anticoagulant in her saliva, her eyes met mine fully for the first time that night. They were clearer now, the crimson softened to a deep burgundy. She didn't speak, but her hand lingered on my arm, a silent thank you. I withdrew a clean cloth from my pocket, pressing it to the wound, though it was already healing under her influence. "Rest now," I said softly, helping her to her feet and guiding her to the small cot I kept in the adjoining chamber for late-night brewing sessions. She complied without protest, curling up under the blanket I draped over her. As I returned to my desk, extinguishing the lamps one by one, I felt a profound shift within me. Concern had given way to something deeper, a willingness to stand between her and the darkness that plagued her kind. She was no monster. She was herself, my apprentice, and I would ensure she never faced this alone again. The night deepened, but for the first time in years, the solitude of my office felt less like a prison and more like a sanctuary.